In 2005, a 76-year-old mob figure smashed into a museum with a sledgehammer. He grabbed Judy Garland's ruby slippers and called it his one last score. He thought the rubies were real. He thought he'd stolen $1 million. Within 48 hours, he learned the truth. The stones were glass. He panicked and got rid of them. For 13 years, nobody knew where they went. Then the FBI found them during a sting operation tied to something completely different. And in December 2024, those same glass slippers sold for $32.5 million. What happened in between changes? Everything you think you know. Frances Ethel Gumm was born on June 10, 1922, in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and her life started in a place that already smelled like the stage. Her parents performed in vaudeville as Jack and Virginia Lee, and they also ran the New Grand Theater, a movie house where live acts filled the gaps between films. So while other babies grew up around quiet rooms and bedtime stories, Frances grew up behind the curtain, with grease paint in the air and applause coming through the walls. Her father handled the business side of the theater, and her mother, a skilled pianist, played while the family performed. At home they called her Baby Gum, and the nickname fit, because she was always nearby, always watching, always ready to slip into the world that her sisters already lived in. That is why the first big moment came so fast. On December 26, 1924, during a Christmas holiday show at the New Grand Theater, 2.5-year-old Frances wandered onto the stage and started singing Jingle Bells. Nobody planned it. Her older sisters were the ones who were supposed to be out there, and Frances was meant to stay in the dressing room. But she did not stay. She walked out in front of the audience like she belonged there, and the room reacted right away. The story goes that she loved the applause so much, she kept singing the same song again and again, 5 to 7 times, until her embarrassed father finally carried her off the stage. What matters is not the exact number, but the feeling she discovered in that moment. The crowd clapped, and she did not want it to stop. Then life twisted hard. In June 1926, when Frances was not even 4, the family suddenly packed up and left Grand Rapids under a cloud of scandal. Rumors spread that Frank Gumm was gay and had made advances toward young male ushers at the theater. In a small town in the 1920s, the damage from allegations like that could be immediate and dangerous. The family's reputation collapsed, and staying became impossible, so they ran far. They moved more than 1,800 miles away to Lancaster, California, a desert town north of Los Angeles. In Lancaster, Ethel Gumm tightened her grip on the dream and pushed harder. She wanted Hollywood, and she wanted it through her daughters. So she enrolled Frances and her sisters at the Meglin Kiddies Professional School in Los Angeles, founded in 1928 by Ethel Meglin, a former Ziegfeld girl. This was not a casual dance class. It was a serious training ground for child performers. Children who trained there performed in short films, did radio work, and took the stage in respected venues. Ethel worked as the pianist at the Meglin studio to help cover the costs of Frances's lessons, and that detail says everything about the atmosphere Frances lived in. It was all music, all discipline, all pressure. By 1932, when Frances was 10, the attention finally reached beyond local stages. Variety magazine published a rave review and called her a singing sensation. 2 years later, in 1934, during a show at the Wilshire Ebel Theater hosted by comedian George Jessel, the next change arrived in public. The Gumm sisters did not sound glamorous, so Jessel introduced them as the Garland sisters instead. The name landed, and Frances became Frances Garland. Then in 1935, she changed her first name to Judy, inspired by a Hoagy Carmichael song. By 13, the child had already been remade. Frances Ethel Gumm did not get to grow into Judy Garland. Judy Garland replaced her. That replacement became official in September 1935 when the 13-year-old signed with MGM. The studio did not just give her a contract and a chance, it gave her a life that belonged to them. She was put on a brutal schedule, 6 days a week, sometimes stretching to 18-hour workdays. In 1937 and 1938, she was pushed to film 2 movies at the same time. She would start with 3 hours of school and 2 hours of singing rehearsal before stepping in front of the cameras. Then the day kept going, often ending at 4 or 5 in the morning. The control did not stop at time, it reached into her body. Studio head Louis B. Mayer recognized her talent. but he also mocked her behind closed doors with cruel nicknames, including My Little Hunchback and That Fat Little Pig with Pigtails. At the same time, the studio enforced strict eating rules. The diet became soup, lettuce, black coffee, and cigarettes, while others ate full meals at the studio cafeteria. She was only 4 feet 11 inches tall, still a teenager, and what her body needed did not matter. What the camera wanted mattered. When she began filming The Wizard of Oz in 1938, she was 16, and the pressure turned into something darker and more dangerous. The studio used cigarettes to suppress her appetite, and the account says she was made to smoke around 80 cigarettes a day, 4 packs of unfiltered cigarettes, not as a personal choice but as a tool. To keep those long workdays moving, MGM also supplied amphetamines called pep pills, specifically Benzedrine, to keep her alert and energized. Then, when the stimulants made sleep impossible, studio doctors gave her barbiturates like Seconal to knock her out. It became a routine that did not leave room for a normal human rhythm. The set itself was not safe either. During The Wizard of Oz, the adult men who played the Munchkins were not children. According to Sid Luft's memoir, these men sexually harassed the 16-year-old during filming and repeatedly put their hands under her dress. The claim is also that MGM knew and did nothing, because the schedule and the money mattered more than her safety. After The Wizard of Oz became a massive hit in 1939, the studio tightened the cage instead of loosening it. They paired her with Mickey Rooney in 10 films total, including the well-known backyard musicals. Then in September 1940, MGM filed a contract that guaranteed her $680,000 per year for 7 years with at least 40 weeks of work annually. It sounds like a dream number until you realize what it bought. It bought her time. It bought her body. It bought her youth. By 19, her body finally collapsed under the weight of it all. Instead of giving her real rest, studio doctors prescribed more amphetamines to keep her working. The cycle continued, and the studio framed it as care. Meanwhile, the contract system helped make this control legal and complete. California had a 1927 law that allowed studios to get court approval for child actor contracts, and once approved, minors lost the usual right to break an agreement. In 1941, Judy married composer and bandleader David Rose on July 28 when she was 19. Accounts say MGM and her mother opposed the marriage and interfered. The story also claims that when she became pregnant, her mother and Rose forced her into a secret illegal abortion to protect her MGM career. The marriage ended in divorce on June 8, 1945, after nearly 4 years. Only a week later, on June 15, 1945, she married director Vincente Minnelli. She was 23. Their connection had grown during Meet Me in St. Louis in 1944. Liza May Minnelli was born on March 12, 1946, at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Hollywood. From the outside, it looked like growth. From the inside, it still came with pressure. Then in July 1947, during the filming of The Pirate, the strain exploded. Judy was 25, overworked, heavily affected by prescription drugs, and her behavior on set became erratic. She reportedly attempted suicide by cutting her wrist, and after that she was transferred to the Austin Riggs Center in Massachusetts, where she spent 2 weeks in treatment. As the late 1940s arrived, her marriage to Minnelli began to break under the weight of addiction and chaos. In 1949, she was fired from Annie Get Your Gun after about a month of filming, and Betty Hutton replaced her. MGM gave her one more chance with Summer Stock in 1950, but even then the engine was failing. By September 1950, after 15 years, Judy Garland and MGM permanently parted ways. She was only 28. Judy Garland's world started to tilt in a way she could not hide anymore in July 19. She tried to end her life by cutting her wrists with broken glass, and the shock of it pushed her into treatment. By 1950, the fear was heavier than ever, because MGM suspended her and then ended her contract in September. She hit another desperate edge and tried again, this time slashing her throat. Her ex-husband Sid Luft would later claim she attempted suicide around 20 times over her life, starting at age 28. After divorcing Vincente Minnelli in 1951, she did not stay alone for long. She had met Sidney Luft years earlier, but they did not become a couple until Their daughter Lorna was born on November 24, 1952, and then their son Joey arrived on March 29. After MGM cut her loose, she needed a comeback, so in 1952 she and Luft formed a production company, Transcona Enterprises, and teamed up with Warner Brothers to make a musical remake of A Star Is Born. In 1954, the film landed like a thunderclap with critics and audiences. Still, success is not always the same thing as money, and despite strong box office, the film did not recoup its huge costs. Money problems did not just haunt her, they chased her. Right at the start of the marriage to Luft, she failed to pay her taxes in 1951 and 1950. By the early 1960s, she was already hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to the IRS. Later, more damage came through mismanagement and embezzlement by people who were supposed to handle her money, and she was said to owe around $500,000 to the IRS and other creditors. And then came the night that looked like pure victory from the outside. On April 23, 1961, when she was 38, Judy Garland stepped onto the Carnegie Hall stage. The room was packed with 3,165 people. She had been billed as the world's greatest entertainer, and on that night, the title stopped sounding like marketing and started sounding like a fact. She stayed out there for 2 full hours, moving through 26 songs. Then the industry stamped the night into history with numbers. Capitol Records released the full concert as a live double album on July 10, 1961. Only 78 days later, it shot to #1 on Billboard and stayed there for 13 straight weeks. In 1962, the Grammys turned that proof into trophies. Judy at Carnegie Hall won 4 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, making her the first woman to win that honor. Meanwhile, her financial destruction kept accelerating. She still owed around $500,000 to the IRS a few years before she died. The IRS placed liens on her Brentwood home and began garnishing royalties. In 1967, at age 45, she filed for bankruptcy. By the time she died on June 27, 1969, the numbers on paper looked like a final insult. Reports said her debts were about $24,000 while her assets were only around $11,000, meaning she died with a negative net worth of about $13,000. In the middle of that collapse, she kept trying to remake her life through love. After divorcing Luft, she married actor and tour promoter Mark Herron in Las Vegas in November. The marriage was confused from the start. They separated after about 5 months, and the story turned dark again with accusations that he abused her. Their divorce was finalized in 1967 after she testified that he had beaten her. Then came the last marriage. Judy Garland married Mickey Deans, a musician and nightclub manager, on March 15, 1969, in London, only 3 months before she died. They had first met on March 10, 1967, at the St. Regis Hotel in New York, and the meeting was tied to drugs. Deans arrived dressed like a doctor, delivering amphetamines to her room after she had run out. He was 12 years younger than her, and friends and family disapproved, with Liza Minnelli refusing to attend the wedding. On June 22, 1969, in the early morning hours, Deans woke in their rented cottage. The bathroom door was locked, and when he forced it open, he found Judy Garland dead, seated on the toilet. She was 47, only 12 days past her birthday, and only about 99 days into that marriage. Reports described her as weighing under 90 pounds. The autopsy brought an answer that was both shocking and sadly familiar. Coroner Gavin Thurston found barbiturates in her blood, an amount equivalent to 10 Seconal capsules. He ruled it an accidental overdose, saying she took more than she could tolerate, and he stressed there was no evidence of suicide. These were the same kinds of sleeping pills that had been part of her life since MGM started giving her drugs decades earlier, a cycle that began when she was still a teenager and never truly ended. And then, as if the story needed one more twist, the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz took on a life of their own after she was gone. Only a few authentic pairs survived from 1939, and one pair ended up in the hands of Michael Shaw, a Los Angeles acting coach, who bought them in Shaw treasured them for decades and later loaned them to the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, where the slippers became the museum's crown jewel. Then, on the night of August 27, 2005, a man named Terry John Martin broke into the museum. He was 76, a former mob figure, and he later called it his one last score. He believed the slippers held real rubies worth the $1 million insurance value. He smashed an emergency exit, and then the plexiglass case with a sledgehammer, and he took them with startling ease. For a moment, he thought he had grabbed a fortune, but the dream collapsed fast. Within 2 days, when he met a fence, he learned the truth. The rubies were glass sequins, not precious stones. Panicked and crushed, he got rid of the slippers less than 48 hours after the theft, and for 13 years they vanished into mystery. In 2018, the FBI recovered the slippers during a sting operation in Minneapolis, tied to an unrelated extortion investigation. The recovery was kept quiet while the case was built, and Martin was not publicly identified or charged until 2023, 18 years after the break-in. He pleaded guilty in October 2023 and was sentenced on January 29, 2024, receiving time served because he was in hospice care. But the final shock came later, when the slippers reached the auction block. On December 7, 2024, Heritage Auctions in Dallas held a live auction that blew past every expectation. Bidding opened at $1.55 million and surged for about 15 minutes, climbing in million-dollar jumps until it hit a hammer price of $28 million. With the buyer's premium, the final price reached $32.5 million, far beyond the pre-auction estimate of $3 million. More than 800 people placed bids, and even the Judy Garland Museum tried to bring them home, but the buyer remained anonymous. The sale topped the previous entertainment memorabilia record by a huge margin, which is wild when you remember the thief once dumped them in panic because the rubies were only glass.